Thanks for tuning in to Can iMedia. Right now, we're at the annual Arctic Oil and Gas Symposium in Calgary, and joining us is Bharat Dixit. You're with the National Energy Board.
Correct.
Tell us your position there.
My role is a technical leader. It's advising the board on matters that deal with exploration and production in the north.
Okay, so we've been talking a little bit about the challenges, and we've been hearing from oil companies. As a regulatory body, I guess, what sort of things are paramount for you?
For us, there are three things that are the most important: is safety of people, safety of the environment, and what we call conservation of resources. That means the resources aren't wasted.
Okay, now when you look at the oil industry in the past, you could say it has a bit of a checkered past when it comes to the environment. You may not say that, but many people, I mean, that's what you hear when you're talking.
Sure.
And they're trying to improve their images right now. Is it a difficult industry to police?
By and large, it's not, because the construct that we have under which we administer these laws is that we make clear upfront what our expectations are, and then we hold the companies accountable to those expectations.
Okay, so somebody's going up north and they're looking at starting some sort of production up there. What are the things that you tell them right off the bat?
Well, right off the bat, the first thing we tell them is, read our acts, because very often what is the operating environment in Alberta and Saskatchewan, British Columbia, is not what you see in the north. So there are peculiarities that they need to be aware of. In terms of guidance, I think we for drilling, we ask them to focus in on what we call management systems. Systems by which people can put their mind to what are factors that can cause harm and how they can mitigate and reduce those things. That's for both people as well as for the environment.
And I guess key for that is because there are such remote locations, if anybody gets hurt, chances are you take quite a while to get them to a hospital perhaps. And environment, of course, depending on the time of year, it can be very difficult to remedy any problems that they've got up there.
That's absolutely correct. The operating windows, as you've heard from some of the other speakers earlier this morning, is a narrow one, mostly in the winter. And it's always more difficult in the winter than it is, for instance, when it's daylight all the time.
Mm-hmm. You say it's different up in north than it is in, say, Alberta, Saskatchewan. Does that have anything to do with the people that live in the area as well? Because we've talked to some of the delegates here, and they feel that up north they seem to be a little bit more connected to the land than perhaps we are here in Calgary or Alberta. Are there challenges with that?
There's certainly quite a number of differences, and I'll just go back a couple of them. One is the remoteness that you talked about, and the other one is really the lack of infrastructure. But what ties it all together is the connectivity that people have said that they feel between the animals, the land, and themselves. And that's a part that we don't always see here. Mature fields, such as in Alberta, there's tens and thousands of wells being drilled, drilling in people's backyard. People are familiar. In the north, it's a vast geography, few people, and they're very tenacious about their environment.
Mm-hmm. Where do you see the future as far as drilling goes up there? Because it seemed to be booming in the 70s and 80s and sort of petered out for a bit. Now people seem interested in it again.
Right. It's hard to speculate on the future, but my sense is that we will see resources being developed because of the richness of the Northwest Territories and the offshore. Mm-hmm. How they will do it is going to be a challenge, because the bar is expected to be significant so that the safety and protection of environment aspects are continually assessed, evaluated, and measured.
Okay, one of the aspects that they're talking about here is who owns part of the north. Because there's 5 countries vying for it, right? Denmark, I believe it is, Norway, USSR, Russia, and the US and us. Right. What sort of challenges does that pose?
There is an opportunity under Canada's leadership in the Arctic Council, which begins in May this year, to bring those various nations together so we have a common understanding in terms of how we protect people and the environment. We recently signed a binding agreement in terms of how spill response capabilities will be in place. So that's an example of cooperation in making sure that the Arctic's character is not adversely affected.
Is there a concern that everybody wants a piece of this and nobody's really willing to share it because there could be such riches up there?
That's not been our experience. Certainly when we deal with regulators in Norway and the United States, they are very much in a sharing mode. So they share with us things that have gone well, things that could be done better. Mm-hmm. We are, relatively speaking, early in the game, and there's lots that we can learn from them. So I don't see protection of environment to be a competitive environment, but certainly operators may feel that because as they compete with each other in terms of rights to drill and drill safely.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about, I guess, the enforcement. If some company's up there and something goes wrong, there might be a spill or somebody gets hurt, what is your role in that?
As far as spill is concerned, the board is the lead agency in making sure that things are done right. We rely on the proponent, the operator, to make things right. And we watch them, and if they're not doing things right, we have the ability to step in and take over operations. We've never had to do that because proponents generally are responsible players, and they do have emergency response exercises, kits, etc., to contain the spill and to clean up.
Mm-hmm. Here in Alberta recently, there was some rulings made on I believe there were 3 oil spills. One of the concerns that you heard from opposition people anyway, critics, they were saying that there doesn't seem to be any financial penalty because they weren't. It all seemed to be administrative or work site related. Explain to me why you think that might, why the public should be satisfied with something like that.
Okay. Clearly, in a spectrum of things, a regulator should have a full spectrum of tools, one of which could be fines and administrative penalties. What our observation is that when we see things not being done right, we can take actions that have a bigger impact than fines. And as an example, recently we had a situation where our chief safety officer issued a safety order, which ended up in having the operations for that company stopped until things were corrected. And quite frankly, that will have a bigger impact in terms of pocketbook and in terms of management systems than any amount of fine.
Mm-hmm. Because if you fine them thousands of dollars, this could cost them a lot more by shutting down operations.
That's my belief. Yeah.
Okay, so there is, in essence, it's almost as if there is a built-in financial penalty, even though you don't levy one.
We don't issue fines, but I think that there are other mechanisms by which we can get compliance.
Often and I'm thinking of disasters like the BP disaster in the Gulf of Mexico, and again, one up in northern Alberta, often you hear the terms that it wasn't a matter of if this was going to happen, it was a matter of when, because perhaps standards weren't maintained at the sites.
Right.
How do you go about ensuring, because obviously we're not getting dozens and dozens of these, but when something goes wrong, it seems to be inevitable, is what people would like us to believe. Some people would like it. Is it inevitable, do you think? And how do you go around trying to prevent that from happening?
So I'll start off with a quote from the U.S. Presidential Commission that was initiated after the Macondo instance. And the chairman said, complex systems fail in complex ways. And that was an example of how the Deepwater Horizon incident happened. And if you look at any number of instances, whether they're in oil and gas industries or aerospace or whatever, they are because of lack of management systems. So our focus in terms of regulatory approaches is to look at how people have done hazard identification, risk assessment, and mitigation. So that's how we primarily approach it. In any event, I think the prevention aspect is paramount, and if you prevent an incident from happening, then you don't have to deal with the consequences. From time to time there are events, and then we want to make sure that response capabilities are in place, and we do that by having emergency response exercises, evaluations of systems so that there is ability to react quickly and effectively when things go wrong.
I imagine as a regulatory agency, you want to monitor the industry and to what it's doing, but you obviously can't get out to every site.
Correct. If I look at what's happening in the Central Valley, because of the newness of it, we are paying more attention to it.
We're talking the Mackenzie Valley?
Yes, yeah. I'm sorry, the South Settlement area, near Norman Wells, the shale plays that has been discussed so far. So we are there more often than we would have, let's say, in an area where activity has been going on for a while. Cameron Hills is an example where production has been going on for years, and we're not there as often. So our approach, one, is by having a physical presence, we incite companies and people to do the right things. So that's just one way. The other one that we find the biggest leverage is going back to that management system. Because if we have a culture whereby this risk identification and mitigation is taking place and constantly being renewed, then the opportunities for things to go wrong are reduced.
Okay. Bharat, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Rob.
We've been chatting with Bharat Dixit with the National Energy Board.